I bought this Einhell track saw about a year ago, and since then I've used it loads of times on different projects on the channel. It's probably the tool that I've been asked most about, and I've had a few requests to make a review of it. So today I'm going to go through some of the features and let you know what I really think about this track saw. This is the Einhell TE-PS 165 plunge saw. I always call plunge saws track saws, so if I say track saw it just means the same thing. This isn't any sort of sponsored video, and I picked this tool and bought it off my own back. Although, Einhell, if you want to sponsor me, get in touch. I got this saw off of Amazon for £89. And I also got two of these metre long tracks for £45. After buying this saw, my dad also purchased one, and he bought a set of the tracks. These tracks though were delayed in transit, so he bought himself a set of the Evolution tracks that fit this track saw, which are 1.4 metre lengths rather than a metre, giving him a full cutting length of 2.8 metres. When the Einhell tracks did arrive, he decided rather than sending them back, he would keep one of these metre long lengths so that he could use these on smaller cuts, and then he gave me the other short length, meaning that I've now got a total cutting capacity of 3 metres, which means I can now cut full length sheet material at 2.4 metres without having to move the tracks. This was the first Einhell tool that I ever bought, and after being impressed by this, when my grinder broke, I replaced it with this Einhell corded grinder, which I have to say I've also been pretty impressed with. Although with a grinder you can't really go too far wrong. The saw's got a 1200 watt motor, which has been plenty powerful enough for everything that I've used it for. It arrived with a carbide blade, which is very good. In fact, I've used this saw for about a year now and I still haven't replaced the blade. It's had tons of use and the blade's still going strong. It's just now, after about a year, getting to the point where I'm thinking about replacing the blade. The blade's got a cutting depth of 56mm without the track at 90 degrees and 42mm at 45 degrees. I haven't actually needed to use this saw at any angle yet other than 90 degrees, but I imagine it would be just as good at cutting angles as it is at 90 degrees. It's easy to change the angle of the cuts without needing any tools, and you simply swap the saw onto the other side of the track to cut an angle. One thing I found with this saw that isn't the best is this guide rail. To be honest, I'm surprised it even bothers coming with one, because it's so much easier just to use it on the tracks. I tried doing a few repeat cuts using this guide, and I found that the saw didn't really want to track straight, so I quickly swapped over back just to using the tracks. One thing I really like about this tool is the cable length. So many tools come with short cables and you end up having an extension lead floating in midair as you use them. But this comes with a 4 metre long cable, and I can use this outside whilst plugged into the workshop socket. I've made hundreds of cuts with this saw and I've always found it really comfortable to use. I cut out the strips for the feature wall that I did, and I didn't find that I had any fatigue, unlike using some tools. The safety switch to stop you plunging is positioned nicely and it's easy to operate one-handed. In fact, I pretty much never use this saw two-handed, so I barely ever use this front handle. Although this does seem to be in a nice ergonomic position to use. It does plunge cuts really easily, and I find the tracks have been really accurate, so getting accurate cuts is really easy with this saw. There's fine adjustment using these dials, which stop the saw wobbling on the tracks. One slightly annoying thing was that when I was using it once, I must have knocked one of these dials, which meant the saw could then move left to right, which has meant when I've been cutting it, I was using all 3 tracks, so the rubber strips on the tracks is now not straight because the cut wasn't straight, so this needs replacing. The good thing is though, you can just replace these. The strips of rubber here just peel off, and then you buy these replacement rubber strips and they just stick on with a double-sided tape. So I'm going to replace all 3 on mine, but I wanted to film this review first before replacing them. You can get 3 meters of this rubber strip at Screwfix for, I think it's £10. So once I've filmed this review, I'm going to replace these. When the saw first arrives, what you do is you set it on the track, adjust the dials, and then this rubber strip is oversized, and then you cut the first cut with the track saw so that you've got an accurately calibrated piece of rubber for your saw. One thing I find that isn't quite accurate on this saw is this depth gauge. So you've got the depth with and without the track. I've got a piece of 12mm MDF here, and I'm going to set the depth to 12mm whilst using the track. Then I'm going to make a test cut, and this should cut all the way through this 12mm MDF. You can hear that that blade's now getting a bit blunt, but as you can see, it hasn't cut all the way through this piece of MDF, and if I break this piece off, you can see that it's about 1mm short. So what I do when using the tracks is actually set the gauge using the top of this piece of plastic rather than the actual mark that's on the depth gauge. And this means you go about 1mm deeper, so you're definitely going to cut all the way through whatever piece of timber you're using. One really big thing with track saws is that they've got a reputation for having really good dust extraction. It's obviously cold in here because you can see my breath. I didn't even think it was that cold. 6 degrees apparently. It does have pretty decent dust extraction. I know some people actually on track saws block up this hole either with a sticker or some tape, which apparently helps. It has got this little pop down piece which is for dust extraction. That does seem to help a little bit, but not massively. You don't notice a huge difference. I do sometimes feel the dust extraction isn't that great until I now occasionally use it without dust extraction, and literally everywhere just gets covered in dust, so the dust extraction is actually pretty decent. I really like this saw, and Einhell as a brand are actually quickly becoming one of my go-to brands for affordable but really good quality tools. This saw actually quickly became one of those tools that I really don't know how I lived without. Previously, for cutting MDF or plywood, any sheet material really, I was using a mini circular saw, which was fine. But to be honest, other than using for repeat cuts and using the guide, I always hated having to run it across a straight edge to make straight long cuts. If you regularly cut any sort of sheet material, or to be honest, if you're doing one project that has a lot of cuts with sheet material, I would highly recommend getting yourself a plunge saw. And to be honest, I don't really see a better option at this price and quality than this Einhell one. Highly recommended, and like I said at the start of this video, I recommended this saw to my dad and he bought one, so that's got to be pretty high praise for it. Renovation Rob doesn't mess about. He doesn't have YouTube, but he should have made one years ago. So hopefully this video's answered a lot of the questions that I've had about this saw, whether I think it's any good, whether I think people should buy it or not. If you've liked this video, please do give it a like. Subscribe to the channel because it really does help me out. And I'll see you in the next one.